In this lesson we'll take a look at the differences between absolute and relative cell referencing. Here's a simple spreadsheet, and this may represent an order from one of our customers. We have the stock item, we have quantity, and we have price. We've also got a handling charge, and we're going to add this handling charge to each of the lines that we process throughout the order. So our formula needs to come into the first cell here, cell E9. So the formula that we enter into this cell has to take the quantity of the items ordered and multiply it by the price. Then we need to add the handling charge to that total. So let's start entering our formula. We'll start with an equals, and we can click to say this multiplied by this, and then plus the handling charge. So our formula looks like this, equals C9 multiplied by D9 plus B6. And if I press enter, that's given me the correct result. I've also got a formula down here, a simple sum formula that's going to add up these cells when we've finished. So coming back to our main formula, we can see that that works perfectly. So all we need to do now is to drag that formula down to the other cells, being careful not to drag too far and spoiling the formula at the bottom. So we're just going to come down to row 12. And when I let go, it doesn't quite give the result I was expecting. So what's gone wrong? Let's take a look at this second formula here. If we double click to open it up, we can see by the color coding the cells the formula is referring to. So the blue cell represents C10, which is correct, and it's multiplying it by the green cell, which is this one here, D10. And then it's adding the purple cell. Now up here, if we have a look, the reference to the handling charge has moved down by one cell, because the cell in which our formula has dropped down by one, Excel automatically assumes that everything should drop down by one. And that's correct in this case for these two cells. We wouldn't want to calculate these two over and over again. So when we replicate the formula down, the formula in this cell should refer to these two items here. But it should also go back to our handling charge in B6. It shouldn't drop down at this point. Let's have a look at the next one. In here we've got the value error, and from our error message video we should know that this is because Excel doesn't understand the value that we're trying to add. So again, let's double click to see where we're going. Quite rightly, it's moved down now to the printer section, and it's calculated 1 times £80, but then it's trying to add the word stock item to that value, and that's why Excel's giving us that error message. So what we need to do in our first formula is to make sure the reference to cell B6 doesn't move. We want that reference always to go back to the value in cell B6. So in effect, we have to make B6 an absolute cell reference. And we can do that by using the $sign. Our reference as it stands says B6. But if we place our cursor just before the B and type in the $sign, and for good measure, let's also click just before the 6 and type in a second $sign. That will fix the reference to cell B6 both vertically and horizontally. And if I press enter at this point, you'll see that nothing's changed in this formula. It's still correct. It's still calculating that 2 lots of 40 plus 1 is 81. But now that we've fixed the reference to cell B6, we should be able to copy that formula down to the rest of the cells, and everything should work fine. And now if we go in and we double check, so let's double click this one, we can see that the reference to cell B6 with the $signs has now made that cell stick, or made the cell reference absolute. So that's the difference between absolute and relative cell referencing. We need to have the first part of the calculation as a relative reference, but the reference to the handling charge in cell B6 must be static. So we use the $signs to make that cell reference absolute. The handling charge up here is known as a constant, So that's going to be the value that's used in all of our formulas. And the beauty about placing your constants in a single cell is that if we decided to increase the handling charge, let's say to £2, when we press enter, all of our values down here should update. So we'll press enter, and now we've got £82 for the first one and a total of 308. So again, we do need relative values for the reference to these cells because we want them to move down each time we drag our formula down. But the reference to cell B6, which is our constant, that must remain static. And we do that using the dollar signs. Just a quick tip, let me take the dollar signs out for a second and press enter. Let's go back into that. So now this cell reference has been set back to relative as opposed to absolute. We can place our cursor in between the B and the 6 and use the F4 key on the keyboard, and that will place the dollar signs in for us. There are instances when we just want to fix the column or the row, and if we press F4 a second time, you'll see that the dollar sign is removed from the B. That means that now column B is relative, but row 6 is absolute. If we press F4 again, the dollar moves to before the B, and that just fixes column B and not row 6. One more press and the dollars are removed, so we're back to the beginning. So by pressing F4, we can cycle through the different options of absolute and relative cell values. I'll press F4 once more just to bring my dollar signs back, press enter, and my formulas are complete.